Welcome back to Danvers Diary. I want to take this opportunity to thank Arlene Young and the Danvers Art Association. We have in this segment an artist in her own right, art teacher, Suzanne Astolfi. Welcome, Suzanne.
Hi.
Now, Suzanne has taken her art a step further with her quilting. Now, what is your background in art? I know that you're an art teacher.
Yes, I studied studio art and art history at Boston College, and then I went on to get my master's at BU in art teaching.
And how did the teaching of the art of quilting come about?
Well, I've been involved in work with fabrics for many years, starting when I first began sewing as a child. And I was also very interested in the visual arts all through my youth. It seemed like a good way for me to combine my interest in the visual arts and fabrics, and I just began doing more and more of it. My teaching involves sharing with others the excitement that I feel about the work I do and helping them to learn new skills. So basically that's where I started the quilt teaching.
Now, you are an art teacher coming up this year in Gloucester this year.
Right.
But you teach your quilting at junior colleges. Which junior colleges and what courses are they?
For the last year and a half, I've taught 2 quilting courses at North Shore Community College. One is called It's Not a Quilt Until It's Quilted, and the other one is Amish Patchwork. And this fall, Marion Court Junior College is beginning a continuing ed non-credit program, and this is the first semester that I'll be teaching Amish Patchwork at that school.
So besides your regular teaching and this, and then you do others consignment work for people too?
Right.
You have brought some pieces to show us of your artwork. These are pieces that you do teach in your classes?
Mm-hmm. These are some of the traditional Pennsylvania Amish patterns that I show in my classes and have the students work on. This is called bars.
And is that normally the color? Are they?
There's a range of colors that the Amish use, and they tend to be dark and rich and only using certain parts of the color wheel. For instance, they will use colors from red, purple, blue to green, but will not use yellows and oranges. And so these quilts reflect those colors. This is the bars quilt. This is center diamond. And this is sunshine and shadow, which oftentimes you see done in prints, and it's called Trip Around the World. But the Amish do it in solid colors and call it sunshine and shadow.
Now, if you put a binding around that, that would be a piece of artwork in itself.
Yeah, this one does not have the border on it. As you can see, these Amish pieces have small inner borders and larger outer borders, and this is just a centerpiece that isn't quite finished. And this is the Amish Nine Patch. This is also a very traditional Pennsylvania Amish quilt design.
Now, do your students do wall hangings or actual bed quilts more when you're finished with your course?
Well, the course is only 6 weeks, so it's really hard to fit long-term projects in that amount of time. Basically, these are the 4 projects that they work on, and these are the sizes that they are. This one is wall hanging size, and this one also can be a wall hanging size, or they can be made into crib quilts. These smaller ones work best as pillows. They're 14 inches. And as you can see, this one has a lot of quilting on it. This is really very typical of the kind of work that the Amish do with elaborate quilting.
Now, this evening you're going to give us an instruction on how you would form a square, just like you do in class, correct?
Sure.
So if I take these away for you and I'll move over. Thank you, Suzanne.
For your very first quilt or quilt project, you need to choose a pattern that's very simple. And I find that the basic 9 patch is a good one for beginners to start with. In its simplest form, the 9 patch is made up of 1 square divided into 9 equal squares. And when you use dark and light colors, you get the traditional checkerboard design of the 9 patch. As you can see, it has very straight lines and square corners, and it's a very good beginning pattern. Now, to add a little variety to the 9 patch, you can start to break down each one of those blocks into smaller pieces, and let me just show you how some of those would look. By putting triangles in the corner blocks, You now have a pattern called shoe fly. If we were to take rectangular blocks you would create a pattern called hole in the barn door. And as you can see, just by replacing other blocks, you can create new designs. Another way that these squares can be broken down is to divide them into 4 more triangles. Let's see what happens when we create a block using those. This is a star square, still using the 9 blocks. And one other way that it can be divided up is to make these into 4 more smaller squares. And this pattern is called stepping stones. So these blocks in the 9 patch can be divided up into blocks of 4 squares, 4 triangles, 2 triangles, and 2 rectangles, as well as the solid squares. Now the pattern that we're going to work with tonight is called the shoe fly. This is the pattern right here. When you begin to make your pattern, you will need a template for each different shape in your pattern. And for this shoe fly one, we need a square and a triangle. The templates need to be the exact size of your finished square. In this case, they're 4 inches. So these will be 4-inch squares and a triangle that is half of a 4-inch square. The thing to keep in mind about the templates is that the edge is representing the seam line. The fabric that you use for cutting needs to be ironed out, and you'll be tracing it onto the back side of the fabric. You want to line up the edge of your template with the straight of the grain of your fabric, and using a sharp pencil, trace very carefully around the edge, holding it tightly with one hand so that the fabric doesn't shift. Now when you finish with the first block, you want to place the next one a 1/2 inch away from the first one. The reason for that is because the space in between is going to be the seam allowance, 1/4 inch for each block. And you would continue to do this, cutting out as many as you need for the particular block that you're working on. With the triangles, again, you want to hold it a 1/2 inch away from the previous block, trace carefully around it, line it up with the previous triangle so that it's also a 1/2 inch away. That's the most important thing to remember, so that when you cut them out, you have your 1/4 inch seam allowance around them. Now as you can see, I'm going to cut through the center of that 1/2 inch that I left, and it's leaving a 1/4 inch. Okay, so you would continue to cut them out until you have as many pieces as you need. Now I'm going to show you how to put the two pieces together by hand. Now we have on each of our blocks a pencil line. This is going to be the guide that we're going to be sewing on. In order to make sure that they line up, you want to take the point, the pencil point at the corner on one end, put your pin through it and make sure it lines up with the fabric on the other side. You would do that on each side, each corner. Put the pin in the corner pencil mark and line it up with the fabric on the other side at the same point. Now, in order to keep this from shifting while you're hand sewing, you want to put a few more pins throughout the line. Again, lining up on one side with the other. This is the line that you're going to hand stitch on. With a running stitch, you would start at one end and use your running stitch straight across the line. By being sure that you sew right on those pencil lines, you're going to get a nice square pieced top. Now when the entire thing is completely pieced, the next step is to quilt it. Whether this is a large bed quilt or a small pillow, it would still need a backing layer, a piece of batting, and the top. This would get basted together with long running stitches, and then you will quilt it.
Well, thank you very much, Suzanne. And I hope it's going to give a lot of people good ideas for Christmas. Now, when is your next courses starting? After the fall one? Are you going to be doing winter ones at North Shore?
Well, I expect that they would be offered in the winter too. Normally they are offered each semester, and if enrollment is good and all goes well, they will be offered in January.
Well, if you get the North Shore Community Catalog, be sure to look for Suzanne's name. That's Suzanne Astolfi. And we want to thank Suzanne, and we want to thank all of you for joining us here at Danvers Diary tonight.